Hello everyone. In this video, I want to discuss a clip with you all that I believe accurately and adequately portrays an accurate representation of the current think that goes on in our institutions here in this country as it pertains to what they think of what's going on in the war in Ukraine and how they think we should deal with the so-called problems of the future.
The invasion of Ukraine is an evil act by the Russians, and I morally support the Ukrainian defense. But the United States needs to face the fact that we can't do everything in the world and that we are way behind on the primary issue facing the country from a geopolitical perspective, which is China dominating Asia. And we are not gaining in Asia by spending in Ukraine, as many claim. And we would have been better served to put a lot more of that money to use in the Pacific. I think there are things that we can continue to send to the Ukrainians, and I've written about that in Time magazine over the summer in terms of like F-16s and Abrams tanks. But particularly the Europeans should step up. I'm also very supportive of securing our border and materially and meaningfully securing our border, which I know is the issue of the day. But realistically, at this point, I think the war is not going very well. Unfortunately, this was an anticipatable reality. We're headed towards probably stalemate at best. But the key here is for the Europeans to step up in the lead for supporting Ukraine and to have a more realistic policy than I would say, triumphalist liberalism that the administration and some Republicans have advocated for over the last 2 years.
You know, it never fails to amaze me how when these pundits or journalists or, politicians or whoever, when they get on TV in front of these cameras and they start speaking and they seemingly offer these alternatives, it's very important you add quotations to that word alternatives as if it's something different than the current way that our leaders are currently doing things. You know, this guy says he has a problem, obviously, with the way that the current sitting government is handling the geopolitical situation. And look at how he frames this. He says that we should hold back support on Ukraine. Obviously, he has to throw in there that the Russians are evil for this, once again portraying this great holy war of evil and good. The Russians and Vladimir Putin being the evil ones, and obviously the West and their allies, Ukrainians, the Americans being the good people. But he says, they really shouldn't be priority number one. Our priority number one should be the main primary issue that this country faces, which is the People's Republic of China. And within that, you can throw in Taiwan, I guess. And it's these types of deranged ideologies that really befuddle me. This gentleman believes that he's offering something different. He thinks that he's offering an alternative when in reality, it's basically the same thing. It has the same result. He's basically just offering more conflict, more things that will eventually lead to war. And I love how he says that the United States can't, he said something along the line of they can't deal with all these problems at once. Well, they're the only country we're the only country in the world that has 900 military bases around the globe. He says we can't solve all these problems at once. Well, it damn sure seems like we're trying to, at the very least, do something with, our battleships playing around in seas where they shouldn't be, causing all sorts of problems. I mean, it really doesn't make sense, getting close to the coastlines of places that consider us to be enemies and what have you, and then blaming them when things go our way. These are the makings of a state that is currently in decline and is in denial of its decline. And he also says that this is a primary issue. Now, he made sure to throw in geopolitical because if he didn't, he'd be ripped apart for it. But let's just take a step back and forget that he even said that. Combating China to our politicians, combating Russia to our politicians, these places that have never shown any intention to harm American citizens in any particular way, to do you any sort of injustice in any particular way. These people aren't your enemies. Zhao isn't your enemy. Vladimir Putin isn't your enemy. These people aren't your enemies, right? But he says that they're, specifically China, is our primary uh, uh, um, thing that we need to deal with here geopolitically. Well, what about the lack of healthcare in this country? What about the homelessness? What about people that can't find a job or a high paying enough job? I mean, there's an identity crisis all across the country. This sense of alienation amongst working people. I mean, there are so many different issues that that just aren't being dealt with, and once again, kind of come into combination with a state, a country, what's the word that I'm looking for? A hegemony that is on the decline. So we also get a little bit of reality upon the situation that's going on in Ukraine. Now, if you watch my videos and if you have a little sense and a little bit of objectivity, you don't need a whole lot for this. You would know that they've been lying this entire time about what's been going on in Ukraine and how Ukraine is winning this war. Remember in the beginning, they told us that Vladimir Putin would somehow be ousted out of power, the ruble would crash, Russia would be no more. All of that has turned out to be false. Russia is I think, is the, if not one of the fastest growing economies projected for the future. I mean, everything that they said has ended in such peril, it's almost laughable. But you see that they also see that the writing is on the wall. I guarantee you this guy was one of the fellows that was championing the whole Ukraine to victory kind of sentiment in the beginning. But now that they see the writing is on the wall, they're kind of backing away from that. And they're saying, well, it'll be a stalemate at best. But what particularly struck me in that clip is when he talked about how they need more support from the Europeans. Now, I don't know if you'll remember this. I may or may not find a clip and try and insert it, but I remember during Trump's presidency, he had this gripe with the fact that, because when it comes to NATO, every country has their own individual military expenditures. The number of which in which they put towards military spending or war spending, which it really should be called because that's what it is. The United States spends almost $1 trillion a year. So, over the course of years, it's trillions, but we spend almost, I think it's like 900 and something $billion a year for the military, for the war machine, right? And I remember at one point, Trump was like pissed or something because he looked at like the numbers that the other countries were spending, and it was hardly a fraction for the United States spending. And that's entirely true. I mean, these other countries, they're not putting up the same types of numbers that the US. I mean, if you look at the people who are spending, the 10 countries that spend the most on military, obviously number one is the United States. The next 9 or so are the United States' allies, with a couple being obviously Russia and China, and how much they spend still pales in comparison to what the United States spends on their military. And Donald Trump was mad at this and saying that we need to get the Europeans to step up. They love to use those words, step up, that phrase, step up. We need to get them to step up and spend more money on war instead of giving their citizens health care or giving their citizens this or doing that. I mean, look at where their priorities lie. And I mean, that's basically what old boy told us in that clip, Stop. Well, he didn't say stop. He still wants us to send F-16s and all these different weaponry and machines to Ukraine because they need it, right? But, kind of dial it back a little bit and realize that Ukraine, or, that's not where we want to be right now. The conflict, who we really want to go to war with, isn't necessarily Russia, it's China. Thank you for spelling that out for us.